Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to think about our annotated bibliographies today. All right. So we're going to start in module number 3. Note that you have a webinar available to you, and that will give you an in-depth look at this module, and it will help you to understand everything that's going on in it. If you want a quick version of this, then you're in the right spot because we are going to go through this information, but pretty quickly and not in as much detail as the webinar. All right. First things first, we are writing an annotated bibliography. An annotated bibliography is basically a summary of a source, and you do that in a bibliographic form, right? So you are going to use 5 of the 10 sources from your preliminary bibliography to complete this assignment. All right, so pick your favorite 5 or the 5 that you think help you to explore your topic the best. Those are the ones that I'd use. Usually with annotated bibliographies, students summarize the information, and so they have a quick way of looking at the sources that they've chosen to figure out if those sources can help them explain a point in a major paper, for instance, like our analytical paper or our final exam paper, right? So if you have those summaries there, you can look in there real quick, figure out, oh yeah, that's the one that was talking about XYZ thing. And you can go back to that source very quickly and then look in that source for quoted information that you can use in those later papers. But the point of this assignment is for you to be able to summarize that information and to capture it in some way. All right. So with that, there are a couple of things you want to do. Number one, you want to make sure that you know how to scan. So you want to be able to look at those articles and know how to scan them and find relevant information. So to help you with that, you want to do your RTL lab for um, for this course. So you want to make sure that you look at your Ruby Tree lab, look at lab number 1. It talks about how to scan and how to do pre-reading skills in order to find that information, all right, and how to use keywords. The next thing you want to do, you want to determine the main ideas of the paragraphs that you are reading in your, or rather for your sources, all right? So you want to look at uh, your Ruby Tree Lab 2, because Ruby Tree Lab 2 talks about active reading, and then Ruby Tree Lab 4 is going to really hammer down on main ideas, thesis statements, etc. And you will need to know how to do that in order to complete this assignment. The third thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is analyzing the types of details that the authors use. Again, that's going to be Ruby Tree Lab uh, number 2, and that's going to really help you get in there and actively read and actively find that type of information to see if you want to use it in your summary. The last things that you want to pay attention to is you want to focus on the introductions and the conclusions of your articles. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to the summarizing or the introductory information offered at the beginning, and you want to look at the summative or the results information at the end of an article in order to get the most out of that article so that you can communicate it effectively. The last thing is that you should finally be able to communicate the information that you found in your sources in a single paragraph, all right? And you'll do that for 5 articles. You'll find that you are at this point supposed to be basically finished with Ruby Tree Lab 1, Ruby Tree Lab 2, Ruby Tree Lab 3, and Ruby Tree Lab 4, all right? All of these are, are key elements in order to help you do this annotated bibliography well and to write those summaries with a certain level of skill and dexterity. All right, so if you haven't done those, you want to get started with those right away. Keep in mind that the annotated bibliography is a summary assignment, okay? So it is short writing, and so for each summary that you offer for your annotated bibliography, each summary should be 100 to 300 words, okay? It can go over 300 words. I don't really have as much of an issue with you going over 300 words. This just gives you a general range for where it should be, but you cannot go under 100 words. You have to meet that minimum 100 word requirement. If you do not meet the minimum 100 word requirement, you will not get credit for that entry. All right. And this is a major assignment. Each one of these entries is worth 2 points each. It's worth 10 points on your final grade. So you want to make sure that you are meeting the minimum requirement for the assignment. All right. If you have any questions about that, please make sure that you either write them in the chat or send me an email if you watch this webinar later and you have questions about word count. All right. Also keep in mind that the only sources that you can use for this assignment, again, must come from the Collin College Library database, and they must be peer-reviewed journal articles. All right. You need the full text article in order to complete this assignment because that's what you're summarizing. All right. Next. How to write an annotated bibliography. Well, you want to be careful with it and you want to use a structure. All right. So you want to make sure that you have read your sources or at least scanned them and paid attention to certain key areas so that you understand the gist of your source. So again, your RTL, your Ruby Tree Labs 1, 2, and 3 are going to help you with reading and understanding. And your fourth lab is going to help you with finding and communicating those main ideas. All right. So a couple of things here that I'll point out that's really important specifically to our class. Here on this page, I tell you about annotated bibliographies in general so that you can do them in other people's classes as well. But I want to pay attention to the key things that are necessary for our class. Number one, you want to make sure that you are using those scholarly peer-reviewed journals and that you have 5 of them that you've offered for this assignment. All right. Next, you want to make sure that you are using MLA. All right. So when you go in for the preliminary bibliography, you'll notice that in the site feature, it gives you MLA 8. And so that's going to be the most updated form of MLA. And so you want to make sure that you're able to do that effortlessly. Next, you want to make sure that you are writing a concise, summative piece for each article. In other words, you want to summarize the author's thesis in the major details. So you want to make sure that you're clear about the types of details that you're using. The next thing, you want to make sure that you write an introductory statement. That introductory statement is going to include the author's name, title, publication, and publication date. You want to make sure that you have that information in every single summary because you actually get points for that specific statement. All right. Next, you want to make sure that you are explaining relevant information for the article itself. And I specifically look for keywords, right? We want to learn how to use transition words. You want to make sure that you're clearly and concisely walking me through this information as your audience. Okay. So you want to use words like starts, begins, afterwards, next, subsequently. This will keep the summary in chronological order. Okay. And so you want to make sure that you do that because I'm wanting to know what's in this article and how does it start? How does it end? This is important because it will help you to be able to go back and find this information easily whenever it's time for you to work on this, use this assignment in order to help you write subsequent papers. You also can use a listing format where you list ideas on top of each other. And so also you have a list of transition words to help you do this effectively. Just make sure that you are using transition words so that I can see how this information is laid out. Finally, for your conclusion statement, which is a part of this assignment, you want to make sure that you are not saying in conclusion, because in conclusion suggests that you are concluding as opposed to the article concluding. So maybe you want to say it concludes, she concludes, etc., in order to make sure that you are communicating that the article's concluding and not you are concluding. All right. Your point is to communicate what's in the article, not for you to give your own personal thoughts, feelings, and opinions about this information. Instead, you are to remain in the objective tone. The objective tone means that you are outside looking in and you are simply informing, but you are not commenting in any other way. All right. Finally, you are to use communication verbs and keep these verbs for the rest of the semester. We need to move from saying the author said, the author says, the author writes. There are a variety of ways to communicate what someone is saying or what they are communicating. And so here are a list of specific verbs that you can use in order to more clearly communicate what the author is saying. This is college composition. Therefore, part of my job as your professor is to increase your vocabulary and to increase how effectively you write for the business world as well as for the academic world. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to upgrade our communication verbs. We're going to move from said, says, and writes to things like asked, remarked, reported, mentioned, etc. All right. So you want to do that. Lastly, we've already covered this part. Your summary should be between 100 and 300 words, and your sources for this assignment, because it is a bibliography assignment, should be alphabetized. So you want to make sure that you keep that going. All right. So in this module, you have a sample, and this is what a student submitted back in, I guess a few years ago now, a couple of years ago now. And so what we do in this module is that we walk through the process of transforming this raw paragraph or this raw entry into a stronger draft so that it's ready to be submitted. All right. So the first thing that we do is that we look at the introductory statement. So whenever you're writing your introductory statement, which is going to be the very first sentence in your paragraph, you want to make sure that, again, you include the author, publication date, etc. All right. And you want to make sure that you follow the rules for writing that type of sentence. So for instance, you want to make sure that you remove the et al. Right? If there are multiple authors, you want to make sure that you communicate that there are a team of researchers, or you want to maybe list the names of the authors. But you want to make sure that you're communicating this information without saying et al. So little things like that. You want to make sure that you're editing for capitalization, punctuation, and italics. The same rules for italics that apply for the preliminary bibliography in the entry apply for when you're writing this in a paragraph. You still should italicize the journal, etc. So you want to make sure that you're doing those small things to make sure that you're writing up to par. I believe a student has a question. If you would go ahead and ask the question, unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Just a little bit louder, or maybe get a little bit closer to your microphone.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. That all is what I was talking about when I copied and paste. It's on there for my preliminary. That's okay, but it shouldn't be on the second part of it.
That's correct. So
Okay.
for your entry, it's fine. It should be there for the entry. Et al. Means that there are multiple authors, and those multiple authors are not listed for the entry. But when you're writing it in paragraph form, you want to address the fact that there are multiple authors, but you don't want to call them et al. Leave that in the entry, but instead say a team of researchers, team of doctors, lawyers, etc. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those details, little things like how the dates are set up. You want to make sure that you are paying attention to how you're communicating. So you want to focus on this page whenever you're writing an introductory statement, just to make sure that you are keeping everything the way that it should be written. All right, so this is just showing the revised version of the introductory statement. And then we're going to take a look at the summary thesis. The summary thesis is the main idea of the article. All right. So you communicate that main idea in your own words. Okay. And so for the summary thesis, you want to make sure that you are writing a very clear statement. Okay. You want to make sure that you're using words like overall message or primary point. You don't want to say main idea, but you can say overall idea, the primary idea. You can say the main message, the main point. But there should be a very clear note or a very clear keyword to communicate that this is the main idea of the article. Uh, this should be the second sentence in your annotated bibliography. And so you want to make sure that you have that keyword in there. All right. The next thing that you want to pay attention to is you want to write this sentence without any grammatical errors. Okay. The thesis is usually the main idea of your essay, and it must be flawless because if nothing else, you want people to clearly understand what the paper is about. All right. So be careful to make sure that you edit it to clearly communicate it and to put those keywords in there to communicate to your audience that this is the main idea. The next thing that you want to pay attention to is you want to ensure that you have a strong body and conclusion statement. All right. So for the body of the paragraph, you want to make sure that you are writing those supporting details, writing the main points from the article, and that you are communicating them in chronological order or the way that it was set up in the original article. All right. If for some reason you're not going to do that, then you want to have listing transition words. And we talked about those on the previous page where you're simply listing those ideas. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have transition words and you want to make sure that you're communicating those ideas successfully. Remember, do not, and I repeat, do not copy and paste anything. Do not directly quote anything. This is a summary assignment. You will lose major points for any direct quotes. You must summarize. You must put this into your own words. All right. The last thing, you want to make sure that you offer a conclusion statement. And that conclusion statement needs to indicate that we are at the end of the text. Remember, you want to use words like he concludes, the researchers conclude, they conclude, etc. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to your sentence structure and that you are writing clear sentences that are edited to standard so that you can submit this assignment. All right. Um, don't forget, you want to attribute these ideas to the author. And when you attribute these ideas to the author, that keeps you in the objective tone. Again, I should not know how you feel about this. Instead, I should just know the information that's communicated in the article. So on this page, you'll see that there's the original annotated bibliography, and then you'll see what the revision looks like. And so that gives you some idea about how much time you need to spend revising to make sure that you have done each paragraph to standard. Okay, so remember, this was probably more like a rough draft, although it was submitted as a final draft. And this is the way that the article should have been addressed uh, before it was submitted for final draft. All right. And the student and I worked on this together, and the student said definitely use this example whenever you're teaching future students, because I would have loved to have sat down with you and gone through this process with you. With that being said, you are free to meet with me if you'd like to, about any part of what I just covered that doesn't make sense or you're still a little foggy about. I'm happy to help you. When we think about the assignment itself, remember you have 5 articles that you should focus on. So here's a sample of what that looks like. Notice that the entry is up top. And it's in the same structure as it is for the preliminary bibliography. And then take a look. Here are the summaries to go along with it, right? So this is just a sample of what that assignment looks like. And so you want to make sure that you're giving this type of effort for your for your annotated bibliography. And that's it. You will have a peer review where you'll submit a couple of your entries. And then you will have obviously the assignment after you do a couple of labs. All right. All right, and then that's it. So if you have any questions, anything else, feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help you. And thank you for attending today, and have a good afternoon. Bye.